Good afternoon to all. This is an activity organized by the Spanish speaking acousticians in the Americas chapter of the Acoustic Societies of America. This webinar initially had been offered as a webinar with simultaneous interpretation. Unfortunately, we had last minute issues with the interpreter, so there will be no simultaneous interpretation. However, we're going to add the interpretation to the recording of the video so that those that wish to listen to it in Spanish can access it later on our social networks. Right now it will be in English, and those who want to stay with us and listen to it in English, they can send their questions in Spanish, and we will translate them for Dr. Xiang at the end. We hope you can stay with us. The Q&A section, we're going to use the Q&A button for questions and the chat for comments. If you want to say hi or make any comment on the talk, then you can use both sections. Today we're going to be talking about acoustics of coupled volume systems. He's going to talk about the most recent developments. The chapter is a chapter, as I mentioned, it's a chapter of the Acoustical Society of America. However, you don't have to be an ASA member to be a member of the chapter. So those who are not members of the chapter yet, we invite you to be a part of it. And if you want to be part of the board of directors and help us schedule activities, please contact us. We could invite you to a meeting and we could tell you how it works. If you're not members of the ASA, we recommend especially these two first categories of membership that appear here. The Corresponding Electronic Associate is a category specifically for people who inhabit developing countries. It costs $50 a year. And students also have a special category. And then you could be a full member or an associate at the prices that appear below, and you can receive all the publications of the ASA. These are the current members of the board of directors. We have good representation from Colombia, Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Brazil. How we would invite you to be a part of this fantastic group. Please also follow us on our social networks. We try to be very active, but we also like it when you connect and add your comments. As I was mentioning, the interpretation will not be available this time. All the talks, the recordings of the talks, have English and Spanish interpretation on our networks, and today we will have both options as the recording. And now we're going to move to introduce Dr. Ning Xiang. I'm going to move to English.
Welcome, Ning. It's great to have you with us here today. I'm really proud to say that my acoustics career started under your wing. I was your student 18 years ago, and I'm very proud to have you here with us. I think anyone who saw your short bio in our publications could be very impressed of all your accomplishments, being a fellow of the ASA, of the Institute of Acoustics, of the German Acoustical Society, being a jazz editor, coordinator for so many years, all the recognitions that you have received, and all the things that you have given the acoustical field in the entire world. So we're really happy to have you here with us, and really excited to hear about couple spaces. And I won't take any more time and pass it on to you.
Okay, Anna, thank you so much. Thank you for the chair and also the leadership group of this chapter. I'm very impressed by the size of the chapter. And I'm also very much honored to be invited to talk about our research work, partially, mostly based on my research, our research work. And Anna was my student. I'm also proud of her, and grown up so so quickly and so successfully into the professional life in Acoustic Society of America, having been taking the lead for so many years. Thank you very much. Again, so now let me share. This is my presenting mode. And can you confirm you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Good, good. So I'm talking about acoustics in coupled spaces. This recent development also go to the most recent, the near recent, but some of our journal publications I'm going to show back to a couple of years until 2018, which is really, I consider that also as recent. There were two profound acousticians. One is Russell Johnson, the other is Christoph Jeffy. Each of these two guys actually obtained the Sabin medal, one in 97, the other in 2011, due to their work in their design of a concert hall or the performing art venues. And they intentionally introduce or implement the devices or component in those performing art venue. And nowadays we can call it acoustics in coupled spaces. So I was earlier this year, I was also in Switzerland, and I got a chance to look into one of the Russell Johnson's hall here in this, that is the lake, a beautiful lake in Lausanne. And there was a cultural center inside those concert hall, about the 1,300 seat. This was early of this year. And if we take a look of the drawing to sketch to show what is going on here, and you can see my mouse. Can you? No?
Yes.
You can see my mouse. Okay, good. So there's a main hall, and but then around the main floors, and then there are also the couple spaces from low side until all the way up, and all the way up. This is the second or higher level. You see this is the spaces, and there were also doors here, and you can close and open or partially close and open. This is another look of into the back from the stage. The point is, all the side walls has this kind of arrangement, and you can close them, and or you can open or partially open it into another, reverberant spaces. That was the very interesting installation, of course. So the implementing of such fancy stuff, and also cost a lot of actually budget in large portion of the total budget. This is also Russell Johnson or Artex Hall in Texas. Very similarly, they have also implemented coupled devices here too. At the early age, when I was actually entering into the professional life of acoustics, and I was also personally experienced the grand opening of Birmingham Concert Hall in UK. On top of those doors are actually designed in such a way that you couple into the so-called reverberant chamber. This is one type of the hall, so-called concert hall with a coupling. Another type of the coupling is actually introduced by Christoph Jeffy. This is the drawing that he drew using his pencil. And this type is so-called theater or opera houses type of the venues. And in the theater type venue, you have a huge stage house. And the owner or the owner of the halls always wish that they can not only doing one type of the performances. They also want to play, for example, the concert hall, the symphony orchestra. And the Chris Jeffy got the solution by building also the stage shells, but the stage shells is built in such a way there is a lot of leakage into actually the stage house. This is the another design sketch. You see the stage here, and then you see the main hall in the theater. And this is what the Chris Jeffy come to the idea, namely the huge stage house. When they deploy that into the concert hall mode, they have to actually put a lot of sceneries, also devices, back into the place in the upper top of them, and then close it up so that you have a space still here, which can be very reverberant. And then those reflectors can be deployed easily from the top. This is one of the scale model picture showing that how they implement this. And there was also a very nice sketch that also provided by Chris Jeffy, showing how these things can be done. So you see that in the stage house that will be used for the theater performance. Once they say, hey, I want to play also the orchestra, and then they have to deploy these hanging panels to be as reflectors over the stage, even into the main hall, whereby the stage shells is actually serving in such a way that they can cut also the volume here in blue, which is reverberant volume. But then the coupling has to be actually installed so that there was also really acoustic exchange back and forth. But on the top of them, many of the absorptive, like curtains and so on, that usually seen in the theater stage can be stored so that that part should not be influenced the reverberant nature of the stage house. Anyway, this kind of things also in many halls that Chris Jeffy built in America, in US, for example, in Texas, there was one such a hall, so-called Bass Hall. In Bass Hall, a lot of actually measurement was done by RPI team in the early years. So this is, you can see the stage, the shells with the reflectors and coupled to the main floor. At the same time, there is also coupling leakage into the space that the back of this is so-called reverberant chamber. And this is top view showing the reverberant chamber has to be huge, and there is also leakage into the main hall of the stage. And this picture showing that also this installation for that orchestra performance. So after showing this, and this motivated my presentation, namely the couple spaces do have a high relevance in the practice. And so far we see majorly there were only two popular type of the coupling. One is the stage coupling that can convert the opera or theater spaces in such a way that you can still do the orchestra performance. Another one is just the concert hall type, solely only for suitable for concert halls. And there, Russell Johnson was the lead designer to make that happen. A lot of the couple spaces in this type of the venues. Afterwards, I'm going to show also another type, which is actually lack of information, lack of the experimental data so far, and we hope that we can pursue down the road. And then after this motivation in blue, I'm going to talk about why we do that, how can we understand the acoustics in couple spaces. And these two items and the numerical predictions is really based on what we have been doing over the past. And we do have also scale modeling and effectively doing kind of the research in order to understand the mechanism or the nature of the acoustics in coupled spaces. Good. The other type, this is a repurposed venue or the hall in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And previously, this big space was a railway station and a very tall building, but the shape of them very much like a shoebox hall. So this repurposed hall was also designed or consulted by Artec, Russell Johnson team. And you can see from this picture here, there was hanging panels from top. And on the back, there is actually, you can see the column is so high. Since the hall is so high, it's not good for the concert hall performance. And then the Russell Johnson team built a lot of hanging panels. Those hanging panels can be actually adjusted and lower or higher. And this picture shows from the top of that hall. The hall is huge, is very, very high, and definitely was not actually suitable for this purpose. That was the reason that they implemented these hanging panels. But then through the hanging panel, that hanging panel cut the space into two places. On top here, and this is the main hall. And this side view also shows how high the column are, and then the hanging panel can be actually lower until this level here. Now here's the stage. Can be lowered at this level so that the projection of the acoustics energy from the orchestra to the main hall. This coupling, I consider that as top coupling, but the lack of the information or experimental data, and I cannot keep talking about this anymore, rather than show my desire to go into those halls to do some measurement in order to understand what's going on there. This is the back view again that you can see after repurposed, and this really looks like a beautiful concert hall. But on the back, you see how high the column were. Anyway, the reason that the reasoning of these two leading scientists or acoustic consultant about the purpose why they do this is the explanation here that they wish to obtain non-classical concert hall or the performing and venues, and those venues has such a kind of sound energy decays, and that they are not so-called exponentially decaying as regular most of the halls, rather than curved in such a way that in the early part of the decay is faster, and the later part and can be actually slower. So if you call it decay time in the later part is longer than the decay time as the early part. And this is what they are arguing, that the early part of the decay, short as necessary, it is correlated very, very good for the clarity, whereby the later portion of the energy for a certain length of the decay times are correlated very well with the so-called perceived reverberance. Both clarity and reverberance are the so-called perceptual attribute, which are desirable for this kind of the venue, but each of them individually is conflicting to each other. If you need a high clarity and the halls can be very dry, and the reverberance is not enough, if you try to make the reverberance as desirable, and then your clarity becomes less. So by doing this, and they hope to actually meet this two conflicting desirable attribute simultaneously. This is the argument. And the one thing that we have been emphasized at the very beginning of our research is that it's taking on a very simple case. If you have a couple spaces in the secondary room here, I call it a secondary room because the source and the receiver listening in the audience will be in the main floor, in the main concert hall, for example. You are not expecting that you are sitting in the secondary walls and you cannot see anything. You can listen to the sound. That is also a couple spaces, but that setting is not actually the topic of the research in the acoustics of couple spaces, rather than only concentrated on the main primary rooms. And the point is, if you could close this coupling, each of individual reverberation time of the room has to fulfill this condition in order to make this acoustic for couple spaces desirable. Namely, in the main floor, the natural reverberation time with the T prime is natural reverberation time is shorter than the secondary room. If you don't fulfill this very basic requirement, you don't have that effect. So you still have a couple spaces, but a couple spaces doesn't work for you in order to achieve that desirable sound energy decay profile. And in a similar fashion, if you have a multiple cases, multiple rooms and or multiple decay times, so to say, that has to follow also similar, has to be ordered, the larger and larger and larger. Otherwise, you don't have this effect. If you have one of them is shorter than the others, that the third one will not show up. Good. In order to understand those conditions or basics of the acoustic in couple spaces, before actually end of 90s, there was not much actually research activity. I started somewhere in the late of 90, trying to understand the acoustic in couple spaces. But then the first thing we have done is let's try to come up with quantification tools and accurate or some kind of efficient and accurate measurement tools first. And without that, without you quantify the basic phenomena in the physical sense or in the acoustic sense, and one cannot effectively conduct research in order to obtain a better understanding. This is what we did. We have also a scale model, and this room can be considered as the primary room and coupled into one space and coupled also into the other space. The look into those scale model, and we try to see that you have here a sound source in the corner, you have a microphone of another corner where they'll have coupling here. The coupling can be actually closed and open or partially open. And if you need another, a third coupling, you can open up this part. And that is what we have been doing. And all the time until recent scale model, we have also much advanced scale model. That was very old models, and the walls was actually featured in such a way we have kind of diffuse sound reflections. So 2006, I think that I don't know whether Anna was already there or already left of our program, and Dr. Leo Branik also paid a visit to our program. He's loved to see that scale model, the dodec sound source for the scale model measurement. So this is what we did a measurement through that course of coupled to two other rooms, and this measurement results experimental data, and together with what we implemented, so-called Bayesian analysis, showing the effectiveness of the data analysis. Then you can see there is actually a curve, the decay, sound energy decay, so-called Schroeder integration, Schroeder curves. And then not only one, the deep slope at the very beginning, there was another slope, decay slope, and then there was even third slope here. Those dots showing that that was the turning point from one slope into the another. So this is all achieved through the Bayesian decay analysis, and this one published in 2011. Why I show this? Because from this time of the year, we begin to recognize that not only those kind of coupling can give you double slope decay, can be more than double slopes. And that was the year we changed our attitude from double slope to multiple slopes. Good. Okay, so this is the one of the picture showing this one of the showing that we're using Bayesian information criteria at that time to decide, in this measurement, you indeed have the three slopes. And the right column is showing that when through the scale model, we can close the door of each of the individual holes and then measure the natural reverberant time of each of these rooms. And then once you have the coupling, you analyze the coupled state, you come up with the 3 decay times. This decay time should be within the range that you are expecting to have. That indeed, and give us confidence, our Bayesian analysis works reasonably well. We can use these tools for the further study. This picture shows, this actually slide shows that about the decay analysis, we have done much early effort in 1995, the one paper published using nonlinear regression method. And later on from the 2001 until recent years, and we publish a series of the work to show and how we do this measurement. And from 2011, we recognize is not only the matter of double slopes or single slope, double slopes, that can be actually multi-slope decays in the regular holes. You may have also that situation. So we developed the efficient algorithms. Those work even only until 2012, and the recent year, even this year, there were also JASA publication, and they all has to based on the early work of this part, especially there is actually parametric model of the multi-slope decay models that they are using, all actually rely on the early work from here. So another research direction is a so-called prediction of the space. We do have another line of the research, so-called diffusion equation-based modeling or simulation. And that simulation is very effective for this type, particularly for this type of the research. And I don't want to go into this much details. This is a governing equation. Then you need actually a boundary conditions. The boundary condition was developed also by one of our PhD student, and when he did this work in 2007, 2008, he did also in the scope of the master degree research and published his work about these boundary models. But what that is that you can very effectively, efficiently predict the sound energy decays in the couple spaces, single spaces, and also more than that, you can also use that to predict the sound energy flows between one room to the others, from one room into the other or back and forth. So this results showing that in order to validate this diffusion equation model, we really did a large number of experimental measurements through the couple spaces in the experimental part, and then using diffusion equation to simulate one state after another. This is so many different states by changing, for example, aperture size. You have the analysis measurement of solid lines is scale model measurement, and the dashed lines is the diffusion equation model. And you see that the decay time 1 and decay time 2 decay times in the couple spaces like this, and they match each other very well. That gives us confidence. The diffusion equation modeling can really tell us about the sound energy decays and also the sound energy flows between the coupling. Using that kind of the endeavor, we can open up that diffusion equilibrium modeling. For example, if we change the aperture size, make that narrower and narrower, what you can see that the coupling, the energy coupled into the main space, the decay rate is more like very similar, but the decaying where that started becomes lower and lower. So if you decrease the coupling size, so to say, and that becomes lower and lower, but the early decay part remains more like the same. That is a very interesting finding for us to understand the acoustic in coupled spaces. So this is also so effective that you can build a large halls, and that the simulations can be very, very efficient. You see the meshes that here, and here sound source in the main floor, there is coupled space, the coupled aperture. I'm going to show the one more steps from the diffusion equation. And what is this is the energy decay. The sound energy is the locational dependent, also time dependent function. And then through this process, so-called gradient, and we can calculate the so-called energy flows. This J is representing the sound energy flows. So that was a simulation, and I'm going to show that you have a main room and sound source is here, the coupled aperture, these arrows showing the sound energy flow directions. And one more time, and this animations was published first time in 2008 in JASA Express Letters. Even today, you can go to online to see this this animation through the online platform. This is another view of that energy flow from the top view. You see this is a coupled aperture sound source. Each of the individual dot is the one position that you want to receive, and the arrows showing the energy flows. Let me animate this. At the very beginning, the energy is going into the second room, and after a while, and the energy feedback. And that condition can only be seen if you have a T2 here, natural reverberation time, longer than T1. Otherwise, if you have the opposite or just equal, T1 equal to T2, the energy will not be actually flowing back. And once more, even this is the intuitive, but through the measurement, through the simulation, we do see this phenomena. So the energy will exchange from one room to the other. The second slopes of often the decaying is due to the reason the sound energy from the coupled spaces really feeding back into the main room, primary room. Otherwise, you will not have the multiple slopes. Another interesting point is the energy flows over the time is also decaying as a function of time. When the time progressing, the energy flow amplitude is also growing, is a decaying. But the energy flow decay show up a dip here, whereby the energy, so-called shorted integration, doesn't show up that, rather than showing only a one connecting point, so to say, turning point. And through this research that we published in 2009, and we correlate very nicely that the dip here is corresponding to the turning point. Why is that? This is the top on top is the energy flows. They at the very beginning they decay, but at this point where the dip is the energy feeding back from the other room. They meet with the flowing into. So the two flows, they compensate each other. Then you achieve a dip. And the other beyond this time point, the secondary room feeding the energy back into the main hole. But after a while, they keep decaying also in a different rate, of course, because the secondary room has a longer decay, shallow slope and a longer decay time. Given that effort that we achieved a lot of understanding, and there were also some other research in the other type of the venues, which is actually worship spaces, that is also worthwhile to mention here. For example, Professor Martin Luther, who is also serving the associate editor of the Jazza Architectural Acoustics, did research also in the big St. Peter's Basilica in at huge spaces. In the Vaticano up there, and which is nice work showing there were a lot of coupling, of course, due to the plan view. You can see there were columns. If you put the sound source in the place and then begin to measure over the places, you can see a lot of the curved sound energy decays. That also explains the acoustic couple spaces really can make the sound energy decay non-uniformly, non-experimentally, exponentially decaying, or in other words, that you cannot observe only the single exponential decay rather than multiple decay. In a similar fashion, there were also the other churches like Basilica in San Marco, in Venice, and what was interesting, even there's a sound source here, and the receiving portion. This is a huge space along this is huge space, but there are coupling from the other spaces into them, and then you can also observe double slope or multiple slopes. So another effort is one of our graduate, and Zuri Su Gao, investigated a lot of actually mosques in Turkey. This is the one of the her recent research using also diffusion equation modeling to predict the sound energy decay in those space. And she find out in many places, and the experimental measurement of the solid lines, and this is a Bayesian analysis of the dashed lines, and give her actually evidence that in those holes you can localize many actually decay slopes, not only a double slope rather than multiple slopes. In this specific case, the measurements show up after full decays. Another important effort why we do the diffusion equation very effectively is that this huge space, if you apply the other method for the prediction, is a geometrical acoustic based, what existing already on the market, or some of the wave-based prediction that will take huge amount of effort, may actually take you doing the calculations over months long. But with the diffusion equation prediction, we can see much faster the results. Not only that, we can see also the sound energy flows. This is the result that Zuri Su published in 2016. With the time of growing, and from a very beginning, sound source is here in this corner, and then the energy flows into the space, and with the growing of the time, you can see how the energy flows throughout the space. And if you keep going, you can see also the energy may also feed back from those dome-shaped, actually, the spaces. So far, I talk about the numerical simulation and the data analysis, and the following, I would like to show some of the experimental effort that we implemented on top of the scale model. And here I'm going to show you the room scanning system with a very high resolution. And here is the one of animation. I hope that I tried one time, but the sound doesn't come out. But anyway, that you can see that this is in our lab. We build a couple spaces. This is the main floor, main room. There was actually secondary room here. And then there is coupling aperture here, opening here. And these doors we can close, we can pull it out at different sizes. And then there is a microphone here. And the entire scanning mechanism is outside the space. And you also see that the walls, I'm going to show you another picture. And this is the microphone inside. And through this mechanism of the scanning, we can move automatically the microphone or the sensors inside the space, one after another. I'm going to show you this animation. There is sweep signs and sounding on the background, and they move to the one place, doing the measurement. After measurement is done, they move to another space until you nearly hit the walls. And then you have to move to the other direction using another axis to move. And after this point, and move back again. You see, move back. In this way, we can couple the larger area, and we can achieve automatic measurement of, for example, entire room acoustic impulse, room impulse response measurement, one point after another. So this is another look into one of the halls. And we also designed the diffusers throughout the spaces in order to achieve as much as possible the diffuse sound field. This is the extreme case, and if you cover partially this walls by the plane surface, then you can adjust even the diffuse reflecting surfaces in a certain degree as we desired. You can see the sound source, the combination of the low frequency and high frequency in the scale model. And the walls, this is the coupling aperture that we can close entirely or pull it out step by step in order to adjust this coupling. There are also endeavor for us to design those diffusers and also the measurement technique in order to quantify how much that you can get from those things in order to support our finding or our research activities to support understanding of architectural, of acoustics of coupled spaces. I'm going to show you the early stage of some of the scanning measurement results. And at the very start, when we have these things going, and the scanning take a little bit of effort for this reason, at the first effort, we just scan area along this side and also this side, so that you can see the phenomena of the sound energy from one room into another room. Suppose sound source is here. I'm going to show you this is the primary room, and this is the one size of the coupling size from top here until here is the opening. What the point here is that in this size, in this area, you can see a different frequency range will show in this measurement here in the very low frequency of that size. You see more like a modal behavior. And by increasing the frequency, you can slowly show, see that the wavefront is recognizable. But when you go to higher frequency, that the wavefront from the corner of the room and propagating through the rooms and can be recognized in high frequency is even more. What was interesting is that here is the walls. When the sound wave impinging upon this wall, there was a reflection come back in this direction. So this is also the results showing the opposite side in the secondary room, and the coupling aperture here, the energy coming into the secondary room by 125 hertz and increasing double and double. This is the ones I can show you the animation, I think. And the energy coming from the room can impinging upon into the, one more time. What is interesting is that at this frequency of 500 hertz, the coupling aperture is already in such a size that holding two more wavelengths. so that you can see the interference lines here. This lines is the dip in our, if we calculate in using theoretical calculation. Go to the higher frequency to 1 kilohertz, you can see more interference lines. By the way, I'm proud to show this because this is not the theoretical calculations or simulations. This is the solely experimental measurement. And that you can see this phenomena if we show this phenomena, so-called the interference lines in the theoretical prediction, that is easy to do. But to achieve that experimentally is really costs us a huge effort. So after a while, we also keep doing for the effort to scan the entire area of the two spaces. And I'm going to show you the entire scanning results that the sound source is against the wall here. And I'm going to show you here, there was a decoupled aperture, and I'm going to show the coupled aperture with a couple of slits here in the, so that room coupled into another is not through one piece of the coupling, rather than multiple slits, vertical slit. And this is the something like that, that you have opening here, opening here, opening here, opening here. This is one of those results that keep thinking that you have opening here, opening here. And then this is in a very low frequency when I show this animation. Oh, this doesn't animate. Let's see the other ones. Oh, this doesn't show up. Let me see whether I can. No. Oh, no. Okay, good. I can now show that now. My point is that this animation, if you are interested in this animation, you can go to online of Jazza Expresslator 2018. There, the animation is online. You can see it. And what was the point here is that in the 500 hertz, the wavelength becomes shorter than very low frequency. In low frequency, this coupling slits doesn't really actually impact the wavefront coming from the main room into the secondary room. You can see the wavefront is still actually a little bit curved, but then they come into there as if there is no coupling. But when you go to the higher frequency, and those slits is highly recognizable, and then that make the sound coupling energy into another room more uniform than the previous case. Okay, sorry that sometimes those animations, for some reason that works, for some doesn't work. Of course, we also are, we have been doing a lot of computer simulation too, and this is the one of our work published in 2011, and using geometrical acoustics package, and in order to try to find a way to explain how can you make those coupling effective for the uniform distribution of the secondary energy coming into the main floor. And this picture here, this rendering showing that was the stage area, and the coupling is actually divided into those slits throughout the entire on the side. You can see the this is coupling. This is the so-called reverberant chamber, reverberant space, and around the main hall. And using this simulation, and this is another view of that space, which is not yet existing, but it is desirable through this experimental measurement of the coupled spaces in the scanning system. We find out, aha, that was the reason that can make the sound field uniform in the main hall if you do this kind of coupling. What was interesting here is also this simulated conceptual halls, and show a very interesting sound energy decay profiles, which was at the very beginning very surprising. Namely, we find out there is not only two double slope energy decays in this setting, rather than triple slope decay. There are very shallow ones. The first one is very deep, and then the second slope here corresponds more like the natural reverberant time of the main hole, and the third slope corresponds very much like the coupled space in the coupled reverberant chamber. But the first one is due to the diffusely reflecting surfaces on the side. And a very interesting phenomena that we, another effort is that we also driving a wave-based modeling, and this is the model so-called the FDTD, finite difference time domain simulation approach. I'm going to show you one of those animation. Hopefully this it doesn't work also. For some reason, this still doesn't animate anyway. And sound source, and that animated showing that the energy coupled into the space and then come back. And the secondary room, the energy coming in through this leakage into the secondary room up the well, they hit the boundary, and then the energy feeding back. And it was working before, but now that doesn't work anymore. The other effort was actually using scale model to support a subjective study of the coupled spaces. Particularly, we are interested in that the listening experience, whether you can have those phenomena as argued or reasoned by the acoustician in the practice. And this was my early work as my PhD research. And at RPI, we also developed multiple artificial binaural microphone systems, so to say. On the left, you see the scale model, the artificial head, 1/8 scale model. And on the right, this is 1/10 scale model. Using those scale model and scale model dummy head, we can then conduct experimental measurement in the coupled scale models, and in order to listen to make the auralization happen, and that is also ongoing research. Overall, and in RPI team and many of others, and the people driving the research in the acoustic coupled spaces, in many lines of the research, for example, wave acoustic approaches, that we are the ones using the FDTD and to do the time domain wave equation solutions, numerical solutions. Well, we also developed a systematic measurement mechanism or measurement technique in order to achieve very high resolution of scanning. And we are actually doing the binaural scale modeling in order to understand more and more. This is also ongoing research in order to conduct some of the subjective investigations. It was ongoing research a couple of years, and we are driving that in this direction more and more. Okay, so it was good time, I think. Yes, this is about less than 1 hour. I showed the acoustic coupled spaces that we are endeavoring over the past 2 or more decades due to a very profound reason. They really are highly relevant in the practical design, particularly in the performing arts venues, whether it's concert halls or in a theater type. And you can see a number of the halls throughout of the world implementing those coupled spaces. Whether one or the others work well or effectively, there is no effect, or effectively by more adjusting you can achieve that or not, it really depends on how well we understand the acoustic in coupled spaces. That was reason that we drive this research over the past 2 decades until recent, and we keep doing that. So we also achieved, modeling effort in such as the diffusion equation model and the wave-based modeling. And we also implement a lot of data analysis techniques, such as the Bayesian analysis for multiple slope decays in order to quantify the stated. And we also using diffusion equation model to identify the energy feedback mechanism really happened in those spaces. So through those efforts, we do achieve a very good understanding. We improved our understanding from very naive or from a hypothesis to the validation of those theory. That's all. Thank you very much. I apologize that the one or two animations doesn't work. I'm going to maybe actually share those animation in video again, so that the recording can add these 2 or 3 slides to your chapter. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Ning. That was a very interesting presentation. I'm sure we all learned a lot, at least for the part that we understood. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. We have one coming up from Fernando. Can statistical energy analysis be used to study couple spaces?
Thank you. Thank you. That was a good question. The statistical room acoustic theory or static energy analysis, the SEA is in parallel to a statistical room acoustic theory. SEA is more in the direction of structure-borne sound, vibration analysis, also energy analysis. They are all, unfortunately, is statistical based. In the room acoustics, statistical room acoustic theory is considered as zero order analysis. Why it is zero order? For each subspace, statistical room acoustic theory can predict only one value throughout that structure, whereby the diffusion equation modeling can be considered SEA in higher order, can consider different shape of the spaces and the different location of the source and the receiver. And that was the recent development that we have been doing, and give us a very good understanding as why zero order is not effective. In the zero order, so-called SEA, in the structure-borne and the statistical room acoustics prediction in room acoustic application was done as early as 1926, the first effort to predict. But unfortunately, the coupled state of the one room into the other, you get only one value for each of room. You cannot see much more details. But diffusion equation modeling is the higher order. We further developed that theory. And the more detailed about that was also in Luther Kramer's book. Kramer, Miller, and Schwartz translated that. There was one entire chapter about the couple spaces, but that theory is so-called SEA, or in parallel to SEA. Thank you very much. That was a very good question.
Thank you, Ning. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
If it's not, or some audiences still try to formulate their question, I want to actually show one more point. I have here couple of more slides, and I prepared. I hope this one is working. At least one of those animations. I'm a little bit actually worried about this animation again. So how about this animation? Can I show this? Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, this is also sweeping on the background. You can see the sound source here. And this microphone arch is a circular microphone arch, and there was one microphone arch right now at this location, when we try to quantify diffusely reflecting element, and this is what we have been doing. And that is even not only about the coupled spaces, but in general, when you design the coupled volume system, why we design that? Because we put that into the center of this so-called ganometer to do the measurement in order to quantify it. One more time. This is the sun source here on the ground. And the surface of the ground is rigid, right? And this is one of the diffusers, so to say, under test. This microphone arch is altogether 5 meters in radius, so the distance from the object to the microphone is 2.5 meters, as listed here. And this is effectively very supportive to our recent research. And the RPI graduate class, every year they are conducting this measurement on their own in order to get hands-on experience. So another interesting point, please remind me if there is a question, Anna, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh, I know what's going on. Maybe actually this is different. Okay, good. So another point is the data analysis we're driving as using Bayesian analysis due to a very profound reason. Namely, in many of those highly diffused surface in the main hole, you are not just expecting that you have double slopes if you have coupled spaces. The coupled spaces, the coupled volume in the secondary room has to be strongly reverberant in order to have a curved energy decays. But even then, the expectation that you have only double slope was very, very limited, misleading, maybe very, very misleading. So in this typical example that you need some kind of tools, so-called Bayesian analysis, there was 2 levels of the estimation. The first level is a higher level to decide in your data how many number of slopes you are looking for. That is the higher level of inference, so to say. Only after you get a higher level question answered, and then you can formulate a model with the number of the slopes that you find, and then you use that correct model to analyze the data to get the lower level, which is the parameter estimation level, to estimate those parameters pertinent to the correct model. So why it is second order? Because if you don't drive the higher order, you may apply a wrong model, namely wrong number of slopes to analyze your data and give you the estimation, which is totally actually misleading, even totally wrong. That is the one point that I have been making all the time throughout over the past 15 years. Okay, so I stop sharing and also stop talking.
No, that was a great point. Well, we do have another question from Kotemok. He says, thanks, Professor. Is there any frequencies mirroring due to couple spaces, some sort of group delay?
Oh, haha. Yes, that was really a very good question. First of all, I want to answer this in a way like our Bayesian data analysis give you not only the multiple decay times. So the first decay is shorter, the second decay is longer, or even you may have a third or fourth decays. And also where the individual decays begin with. So the lower the level, and then you have the second decay has to be in the lower level, and the third one is even lower. Those lower level corresponds to a certain delay in the group delay time. And in the other question that is so-called statistical room acoustics, Jason Summers, which is Dr. Summers, also obtained the PhD degree from our program and in early years, and also formulated actually extended SEA as statistical room acoustics prediction and incorporating the decay time for the rooms that far away from, or even farther. And those actually give you a group delay time, but in only a one value, so to say, or a narrow distribution of that. But that is not really true in the reality, because depending on where you sit, where relative to the coupled apertures, and that the decay constant, so-called group delay, has to be modeled or has to be predicted correctly. But that can be only done by experimental measurement and then correct data analysis, such as Bayesian analysis, will give you also the support of those decay delays, and together with how much levels that come down relative to the first decay slopes. Oh, that is a very, very challenging question. Very challenging question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have another question from Juan Oscar. At which coupling windows opening percentage both spaces behave as a single space instead of as coupled spaces? Is there a rule of thumb to
Yes,
identify
the rule of thumb,
volumes? Yeah.
Thank you. That was really very, very good too. There were two important states. One is the contrast of the natural reverberant time. Natural reverberant time, I'm talking about if you were close the coupling. Each of the individual room, what was the general reverberant time of them? The contrast has to be large. Yeah, especially the secondary room has to be way, way longer in the reverberant time. Whether your volume is large or not, it doesn't matter. You really have to shape that volume to be more reverberant. If the contrast is just actually tiny, let's say 1.5 times or 2 times, if you just slightly open the aperture, and you may not observe that, especially when the aperture becomes larger. You don't have that phenomena, and then you have to narrow down the aperture opening, and then you can observe there is actually secondary decay slope, which is much, much lower, because you actually decrease actually the coupling aperture opening. And that was also one of the reasons we suggest in the practice, if you really want to design them, you have to deploy many, many couplings in order to enhance of individual decay slope to be higher, in order to be able to perceive it. So to answer your question is that if you opened up the aperture much larger, it's so large, please, there is no coupling anymore. I mean, the coupling means perceptual relevant or perceptual desirable coupling phenomena is gone. Of course, if you talk about physical coupling, it's still there, but the physical coupling, we really want to use the physical coupling or so-called acoustical coupling to achieve perceptual desirable features. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. We don't have any more questions. Maybe I can ask one. You mentioned a little bit about geometrical acoustics simulations being somewhat limited for this kind of analysis. Do you see any advantages in exploring more geometrical acoustics tools for this type of analysis, or do you think that it just won't get farther than what Philip did from the example that you showed earlier?
Yeah, I would thank you for this question. This is really a very, very good question. At the same time, I want to say that if I show this one more time, this simulation is really was based on geometrical room acoustic simulation, either use EASE or use CAD acoustics. I think that is a way that you can achieve this. We inspired by one of our peers, and they look at also into the main hall of one of the Lucena hall using that big shape, but try to simulate also the coupling phenomena through that. And through this measurement, through this modeling, we find out the challenges of multiple slope decays, to be honest. And then we immediately around that time, we did also the scanning measurement, the physical scanning measurement in order to confirm that the slopes of the very, very deep slope was really coming from the reason of your surface becomes very, very scattered, the side surfaces. So in this sense, I believe that you're right, namely geometrical acoustic simulation can still support this research. But on the other hand, the results, we enjoy the results in a very moderate way. Why is that? If you have a very, very narrow slits, your scale modeling, no, your geometrical acoustic modeling violates the basic principle. Namely, the aperture size, the size is so narrow, you can only observe this phenomena in a very, very high frequency, even 20 kilohertz or what, in order to make your simulation more or less valid. But this doesn't, this simulation didn't mislead us to identify the three slope or multiple slope, because we immediately conducted the research using the scale model of the slits-wise coupling. And that support us to say it's okay, especially in the high frequency. This is the physical measurement, so to say, even that published in 2018, just recent years, but that work was conducted in around 2011 or 12. And this is also another way to say, haha, geometrical acoustics modeling for concentrated coupling apertures, for relatively large aperture size, you can still drive geometrical acoustic modeling. But for a very narrow slits, your modeling results, be careful to interpret your results in a very moderate way until you do have a physical measurement to support your finding. Thank you for this question. This question is also valid at the same time to our diffusion equation modeling. And the diffusion equation model, in opposite to geometrical acoustic modeling, that you have to drive so tens, hundreds, or even millions of the rays in order to get reasonable results coming from the coupling secondary room coming into your back room, and take a long time to do the calculations, where the diffusion equation modeling can be very effective, can be very efficient in a matter of tens of seconds or just within an hour or so. But that enjoyable feature of diffusion equation modeling needs to be also moderate or modified if your coupling aperture is narrower. If it is narrower, you really have to mesh your space in a very, very refined way. If you do the refined way, the diffusion equation modeling can be less effective. The efficiency becomes reduced. But we do find the time to find mesh around the aperture, narrow aperture only, whereby the larger space, we still use actually a larger meshing distance in order to compensate this low effectiveness of the modeling. And in the end, that was a very, very good combination of them. So thank you for this question. So now come back to, again, to your point, because the geometrical acoustics principle doesn't include interference and the diffractions, whereby around the age of the coupling apertures, lot of diffractions happen. That already shown up in our scanning measurement results. I apologize that the two scanning, the animation doesn't work. And before the lecture, I tried it out. Everything worked fine. But for some reason that doesn't work. But I'm going to provide this 2 or 3 of animations in the video so that you can append it into your recording. Yeah.
Sounds good. We have one last question. So we don't want to take too much of your time. Is there any suspicion about deficiencies or abundances of warmth near or away from the source in couple spaces?
Can you acoustically? I didn't get that correctly. So source, right?
So he's asking if you have experienced warmth or the lack of warmth near or away from the source in couple spaces.
Okay. Let me actually try to see whether I can give you some of the explanation towards your question. The acoustic in the performing arts venues, this phenomena, either physical or perceptual, should be actually highly dependent on the location. If you are near, sitting in the main hall, near to coupling aperture, you may have increased chance to perceptually perceive those phenomena, so-called very high clarity, but at the same time that you perceive also the high reverberance, which is desirable also. But if you go away from it, more far away, and only direct sound dominant, and you still have a so-called double slope, a multiple slope, but the multiple slope, double slope becomes very, very lower in level. Of course, the group delay time, that one of the questions coming from there, that also delayed also in time. But then you may not perceptually detect it or perceive it effectively. And when you are sitting close to the source, for example, if you are close to the stage, and those phenomena becomes less and less noticeable, the coupling energy coming into your place, which you are sitting very close to the stage, is so much lower that the perceptually is insignificant. This is through our scale model measurement, high spatial resolution scanning measurement and data analysis has confirmed this point. And highly dependent on the location, of course, depending on also on the aperture size. And you can only have a very, very clear double slope or multiple slope if your coupling area is smaller than the wider ones. But if you make the size smaller, your curved slope becomes lower and lower in the level, and that perceptually becomes insignificant. So definitely there is a certain naivety at all our understanding at the very early stage. We say, wow, it is nice, you have couple spaces. Oh, this is the to meet actually simultaneously high clarity and also high reverberance as desirable. But in the end, they're only location dependent, also depending on how you design your coupling aperture, how you design the reverberant chamber. As the designer later on told us also very interesting story is that they designed that way, but the owner, the user of the halls, look at the space, oh, so a huge space is unused. We have a lot of stuff we need to find storage and put it there. If you put your stuff into that reverberant chamber, you make that chamber less reverberant, you don't have effect at all. Thank you for your question. That hopefully that answered that question in that direction.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think we're gonna finish today here. Again, we thank you so much for being with us today. We apologize to everyone who was expecting the translation to be here, but like we said earlier, we're gonna provide the translation for the recording so you can come back and listen to it in Spanish. It's going to be posted to our social networks, so please come with more questions and comments. We'll tag Ning so he's able to see your comments and questions and maybe continue the conversation. And we're looking forward to seeing more publications and more results out of your research.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you for the audience. Mariana, you want to say something?
Just wanted to thank you, Ning. I wanted to echo what Anna said. We're really grateful to have you here and for your time. This was a great talk.
Thank you again. Thank you for the audience for your attention. Sorry about the language and the Spanish language. And if I wish I could speak Spanish language and to give you a talk. But I do have the capability to deliver my research also in German language, but not Spanish.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and hope seeing you in next AIS meeting also. And
Yes.
we keep in touch. I'm providing you another 2 animations, Anna. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you,
Thank
Ning.
you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Bye bye.